Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Survivors, families, and Indigenous organizations from across the country continue to respond to Pope Francis's apology for the horrors committed at Catholic-run residential schools. While it was long and awaited, much appreciated by some, for others it wasn't. Here's Annette Francis explaining.
On Friday, Pope Francis stood in front of over 200 Indigenous delegates and residential school survivors. They made the trip to the Vatican seeking an apology, and he did just that. Adam North Pagan is the president of Legacy of Hope, a national foundation that supports residential school survivors. He says the apology is a major step toward reconciliation.
We're very adamant that that apology needs to come home to Canada, and that apology needs to happen on Canadians in Canada on Indigenous land somewhere, on Turtle Island. To make it a lot more meaningful and to bring reconciliation full circle.
Michael Dockstader says it wasn't a full apology because Catholic teachings say forgiveness can only come from the top, from God.
So popes don't ask us mortals, us mere mortals, for forgiveness. It doesn't work that way. And what the Pope actually really said was, he felt bad that bad people did bad things to us over here, and that we were hurt by that. But that has nothing to do with the Pope. That has to do with those sinners.
Dennis Shorty is a Casca musician and artist from Ross River, Yukon. At the age of 5, he was taken to Lower Post Residential School in Lower Post, BC, where he was abused. He says the Pope's apology can't undo the cultural and spiritual loss he experienced. That's why he wants action behind it, like financial assistance.
There's nothing there in place for us. Even right now, for me, I use my artwork, my music. What I need is financial help to deal with it for myself. Continue teaching through music, through artwork. Apology is one thing, but action, there has to be action behind it.
The Pope has vowed to come to Canada, perhaps as early as this July, but no exact date has been set. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A First Nation in Manitoba is searching the grounds of a former residential school in their community to locate potential unmarked graves. With more, here's Daryl Stranger on that.
The Cross Lake Band, also known as Pimachikamak Cree Nation, has begun an investigation into the St. Joseph's Residential School that was managed by the Roman Catholic Church in Cross Lake, Manitoba. The investigation of the school, which operated from 1912 to 1969, will use ground-penetrating radar of the old residential school grounds. So far, 85 children have been identified through documents obtained from the Archdiocese in The Pas, Manitoba.
I invited my counselor, because I couldn't go there myself, so I invited my counselor, Shirley Robinson, to go to the PA and retrieve the documents that they had. And that's where we found out there's 85 names, or I shouldn't say all, because they're not all names. 85 children that are documented to have died in a residential school. Unfortunately, some were actually named as boy or girl.
Cross Lake intends to collect all relevant information from government, medical, and church organizations and develop a database that will contain all the names of the students that attended the residential school and where they came from.
We are trying to find the truth. What happened? We know the truth, but we don't know the details. And I know it's going to bring a lot of hurt once we find out the details. But I think the more we know, and the more we can deal with what we know, and be able to deal with it and to move on.
The community also plans to erect a permanent memorial monument to honor the former students, including all Cross Lake students that attended other residential schools. A gathering will take place in Cross Lake as soon as all COVID restrictions are lifted for community input.
Dialogue happens, and dialogue leads to ideas, dialogue leads to problem solving, dialogue leads to healing, and also dialogue leads to learning and developing information packages for our families, but also for our youth and young people that that are not aware of what's happening out there, but that will be impacted by these things.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Now that the Pope looks to be coming to Canada to apologize for his church's role in the residential school system, residential school survivors are going to have to decide how much, if any, of that apology they're willing to accept. Our Kent Driscoll sat down with one of those survivors in Nunavut to ask just what a proper apology will take.
Last week's apology by the Pope to Indigenous leaders wasn't the end of the process to account for what happened in Canadian residential schools. It wasn't the beginning either. Jack Anawak, former Nunavut MP and MLA, spent 4 years in residential school in Chesterfield Inlet and 2 more in Churchill. He started lobbying in 1990 with 2 former classmates.
By writing a letter to the Bishop of the Hudson Bay, Catholic Bishop, because there had been an apology to the First Nations at Lac St. Anne, and we knew, me and Peter and Marius knew that there had been abuses, as well as having been abused ourselves.
ITK was in attendance in Rome, and their priority was to lobby the Pope to help return French priest Johannes Rivoire to Canada, where he's facing new charges for sexual assault from his time as a Nunavut residential school teacher in the 60s. Anawak wants Rivoire to face justice too.
People who committed the Holocaust were being tried in their 90s and later on, and so the same should hold true for people like him. And because his victims are still suffering from that trauma.
As for the apology from the Pope, when the Pontiff arrives to Canada later this year, Anawak says he better be bringing more than words.
There has to be the understanding that you can't just stop at an apology. There has to be some offers of programming funds to deal with the people who have either suffered or pass on intergenerational trauma to their children, to other people.
There were 13 residential schools in Nunavut. The last one stopped operating in 1996. Many of the students are still alive. Whether the apology is accepted will have much to do with how it addresses the living student survivors. Survivors just like Jack Anawak. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Manitoba Metis Federation members gathered for their annual general meeting in late March. A small part of the agenda was their response to a workshop critical of its governance, put on by an independent collective calling itself Red River Echoes. Amelia Fournier has this.
Inherent wisdom and understanding about what Métis governance means, and so
Red River Echoes held a virtual governance workshop ahead of the MMF's annual General Assembly.
And I just want us to think critically about
and it caused a stir at the live stream meeting held in Winnipeg.
So you've disrespected them, you've disrespected our own process, and you've disrespected everyone that's sitting in this crowd. Because you don't agree with something. If you want to run for something, and I've said it already this morning, then run for something.
But people have a right to speak, people have a right to share their opinion, but people have to respect the democracy of our government, and the Dem will better, because I'll protect it, I show you that.
But MMF Housing Minister and Assembly Chair Will Goodon tamped down the rhetoric, saying,
I think both sides need to take a deep breath. To be quite honest.
He said the conflicts distract from real issues facing the nation.
In my opinion, the real battle is protecting the nation, protecting who we are, because there's folks out there who are pretending to be us.
So I'm going to share my screen here.
He also said the workshop was misinformed, saying the MMF is governed by the Manitoba Business Act.
And that was another issue that was raised about the corporate structure of the MMF, and that is not there anymore. We literally signed a self-government recognition agreement last summer, so there's no corporate body anymore.
I'm 28 years old. My mom died when I was 21. I went to law school right after that.
He highlighted the relative inexperience of the group, but admired their passion.
These Red River Echoes young folks who are doing the work there, they've got the fire in their belly. I've got the fire in my belly. The president does too, and we all want the same thing, which is to have the Métis Nation move forward in a good way.
Goodon hopes the MMF and Red River Echoes can come to an understanding for the good of the nation. and encourages the collective to get involved with MMF locals.
A constitution establishes our particular worldview or legal order.
Brianne Lavallée-Heckard, who ran the workshop, says she no longer feels that she will personally be able to work with the MMF, but other collective members, many of whom are active in MMF locals, may be able to.
That's what I think our focus is on right now, is like our own healing and well-being. And if the MMF does and the MMF cabinet don't likewise take their own healing seriously, we're not going to engage.
Emilia Fournier, APTN National News, Montreal.
We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, a police watchdog closes its investigation into a Mohawk woman who was trampled by a police horse at the Ottawa protests. Stay with us. The civilian agency in Ontario that investigates police brutality has closed its probe into a Mohawk woman who was trampled by a police horse. It happened at the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa in February. The decision comes following an interview with the woman, a review of police drone and body-worn camera footage, as well as the woman's medical records. The woman was treated for a strained shoulder after she was knocked down by a police horse that was walking through a crowd of people. Because she didn't suffer fractures or worse, her injury isn't considered serious. The decision said that the Special Investigations Unit only investigates serious injury or deaths involving police, so this file is now closed. Well, it's been nearly 2.5 years since we brought you a story about a grandfather and his 12-year-old granddaughter who were handcuffed outside a Bank of Montreal in Vancouver after a bank employee suspected that their status cards were fake. APTN's Tina House has an update on that story.
It all began on December the 20th, 2019, when Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his 12-year-old granddaughter from the Celtic Nation went to the Bank of Montreal in downtown Vancouver to open up her first bank account. It should have been a routine experience, but Maxwell says things went awry when he presented their federally issued status cards to the bank teller.
She said, "Sorry, but at this time we can't issue a card for your granddaughter right now." She said, "Come upstairs and you guys will get your status cards back."
Johnson says that after waiting upstairs for a half an hour, Tori saw two police officers approaching them.
She said, "Papa, one of these guys are for us." I kind of laughed and I said, "I don't think so." And sure enough, they came over, grabbed Tori and myself, walked us outside, turned us around, handcuffed us, told us we weren't under arrest but we were detained, and then they read us our rights.
Despite Vancouver Police Chief Adam Palmer stating that the officers operated in standard operating procedure, a tribunal led by retired Judge Brian Neal has ruled that the two officers have committed professional misconduct by recklessly arresting Mr. Johnson and his granddaughter without good and sufficient cause, and recklessly using unnecessary force on Mr. Johnson and his granddaughter by applying handcuffs to the parties on arrest without good and sufficient cause. They further stated that handcuffing a 12-year-old child is inexcusable. Maxwell Johnson Sr. joined us by Zoom from his home in Bella Bella after hearing the decision.
I know they have a job to do, and doing it the way they did, it was just right. It wasn't right.
The tribunal ordered the officers be suspended for several days, that they complete intensive, immersive Indigenous cultural sensitivity training, and that they complete retraining and de-escalation skills, risk assessment, and power of arrest. The tribunal also ordered the officers to provide a written apology and offer to meet to listen to concerns and give an oral apology.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming to get this decision, and we're all really happy at where it's going now.
Since this incident took place, Maxwell Johnson Sr. and his granddaughter have filed human rights complaints, and the Celtic Nation has offered a chance for the officers to attend a healing ceremony in Bella Bella in the near future. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Fort Liard in the Northwest Territories is exploring ways of preventing crime and responding to emergency situations without using typical police enforcement. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs explains how the pilot program could set a precedent for other communities.
When Dylan Steves goes into work, he never knows what calls for help will greet him. What he can be certain of is he'll respond to those requests with understanding. That's because he's an officer developing and implementing the Northwest Territories' first community policing program. Since September 2021, Atro-Danico, Fort Liard, Northwest Territories, has been learning how to keep their community safe on their own terms, in their own way.
Connect with people on a personal level. They're not throwing someone in from somewhere else that no one knows. And I think that's a good part of building relationships is there's already a relationship there, and we know everyone in the community, everyone knows us.
Steves is one of 2 officers on the job, both local, both Indigenous. They've received training on victim and trauma-informed approaches, operational readiness, behavior of people in crisis, and more.
Just getting to the root cause of the issue they're dealing with, not beating around the bus, just ask those questions, let them know that we're there for them, let them know that we're there to help, and just get down to the basis of it and try not to, escalate it to more than what it is.
The Hamlet Senior Administrator, John McKee, says the program will offer community-based responses to public safety issues and reduce the number of calls to RCMP.
We identified this as one of the priorities because it's been mentioned by community members and people not knowing where to turn, and they're really vulnerable.
The program makes elder safety a priority.
We're going to have a sign that we put in each elder's house, and it will have a number, and then we'll do a brief resume of who's in the house, if there's any disabilities, any issues in that house. And this will be available to us, the RCMP, social services, that type of person, so they know when they go to that house, they'll have the background.
Officers also respond to concerns over the safety of intoxicated individuals.
We try to get people to a warm, safe place where someone could take care of them, and usually calling the RCMP is the last kind of action that we would take if there's no other options.
A keystone to the program, the fact officers don't have authority to enforce laws, nor do they carry weapons. They respond to non-criminal concerns and foster relationships between community and RCMP.
And I think that's where we go back to the important part of being from the community and everyone knowing us. So, growing up in the community and living around everyone that lives here, I think that kind of makes us feel safe. And I don't think there's any sort of need to carry any sort of self-defense weapons or anything like that. And then again, it makes us more approachable. You don't want to approach someone who has a baton and pepper spray.
The program is earmarked for 3 years with territorial funding that comes in just over $300,000. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Fort Liard.
It's been almost 3 years since the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls released its final report. On Monday, a Senate committee heard from the inquiry's former commissioners on how the government is doing in terms of implementing the report's calls to justice. Here's Fraser Needham with that.
Upon all governments to ensure that all Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people are provided with safe, no barrier, permanent, and meaningful access to their cultures.
A total of 231. This is the number of calls to justice in the MMIWG final report. But how exactly is the federal government doing as far as implementing these calls to justice? The establishment of an Indigenous and Human Rights Ombudsperson and Tribunal would be one way to measure success of implementation. But former Commissioner Marion Buller says it's hard to tell where the government is at on this.
After June 30th, 2019, nobody reports to me or any of the other commissioners. So the only way we can find out is like any other citizen in Canada, and that's to do Google searches from time to time.
Former Commissioner Kaya Robinson says success can't be measured by government dollars spent or programs created.
But they must do more so than just show you the budgets that they've spent and the line items attached. They must be prepared to show you how it has affected people's lives. You must learn to understand, and they must demonstrate how their actions, decisions, have informed and enhanced the lives of people.
The response to the report is the Trudeau government's responsibility. But the former chief commissioner says the Senate can play an important role.
What can the Senate do to assist? I think there are many ways that the Senate can put very subtle pressure on the executive branch. Embarrassment is a good form of subtle pressure.
June 3rd will mark the third anniversary of the release of the final report of the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We need to take one more break, and when we come back, APTN celebrates huge wins at the Canadian Screen Awards. Stay with us. It was a night of firsts at the Canadian Screen Awards last week. APTN News won an unprecedented 3 categories. Tina House won for Best National Reporter for her coverage of the former Kamloops residential school graves. She's the first Indigenous person to win in that category. The big upset of the night went to APTN Investigates for Best News and Information Series. This clip is from last year's episode, Racism Lives Here.
When you are living this lifetime as a person who is a Mi'kmaq woman, and you know there's a huge statistics against you that one day that might be you, or on the other side, you're looking at Black Lives Matter and you're seeing a police officer and you're like, oh, please don't pull me over. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone saw that video of George and all those things that just get swept under the rug. We were all witnessing it.
I was watching it unfold, and didn't surprise me really, because this has been going on a long, long time. Not only in the States. I know Canadians like to get a little snobby-like, and it's not us. Like hell it isn't.
And the Best News and Information segment went to Cullen Crozier and Kenneth Jackson for their episode, The Death Report.
In 2014, 3 sisters died by suicide within 7 months of each other. Each had one thing in common: a First Nations child welfare agency in northwestern Ontario, Wichita Family Services. In the years since, the last surviving sister has been struggling to come to terms with all she has lost while in care.
Like, I can't call them up and tell them my problems. Like, I can't laugh with them. I'll never hear their laugh again. I'll never be able to hug them again. All of that's been taken from me.
Investigates won that category for the first time ever, beating out journalistic heavyweights, the CBC's Fifth Estate and CTV's W5. APTN and Stephanie Clattenburg also won Best Direction in a Factual Documentary for the series Spirit Talker. Huge congrats to all of the winners. Well, that is a wrap on your Indigenous news from around the country. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We're thankful that you could join us. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.